Why your emotions make more decisions than you think. Imagine you're standing in a supermarket. You came for one simple thing, a bottle of water. 10 minutes later, you walk out carrying snacks you never planned to buy, a notebook you don't really need, and a drink that looked interesting simply because it was placed at eye level. You laugh at yourself. How did that happen? The answer isn't a lack of intelligence. It's something far more human. Every day, we like to believe we're logical creatures. We create plans. We compare options. We tell ourselves that every important decision is carefully considered. Yet if we looked honestly at our lives, we'd notice something uncomfortable. Many of our biggest decisions begin with emotion, and only afterward does our mind invent logical reasons to justify them. Think back to a moment when you argued with someone you cared about. At the time, you were convinced you were defending the truth. Hours later, when the emotions faded, you suddenly realized the argument had never really been about the words. It was about pride, fear, feeling misunderstood. This is one of the most powerful realities of human nature. Reason often arrives after emotion, not before it. Our brains are extraordinary problem-solving machines, but they were never designed to eliminate emotion. They were designed to work alongside it. Fear once protected our ancestors from danger. Anger helped them defend what mattered. Curiosity pushed them toward discovery. Love created families and communities. Without emotion, humanity would never have survived. The problem isn't that emotions exist. The problem begins when emotions quietly take control while convincing us that we're being completely rational. That is why intelligent people sometimes make terrible financial decisions. Why experienced leaders occasionally destroy their own careers. Why loving couples say words they regret forever. Intelligence does not make us immune to emotional thinking. In fact, the more intelligent we become, the better we often become at defending emotional decisions with convincing logic. This creates a dangerous illusion. Instead of asking, "Why do I feel this way?" we immediately ask, "How can I prove I'm right?" And those are two completely different questions. The first creates awareness. The second creates conflict. One simple habit can dramatically change the quality of your decisions. Whenever you notice yourself wanting to react immediately, pause. Not for an hour, not for a day, just for a moment. Ask yourself, if I weren't feeling this emotion right now, would I still make the same choice? That single question creates space between emotion and action. Within that space lives wisdom. Sometimes you'll discover your first reaction was exactly right. Other times you'll realize your emotions were telling only part of the story. Neither outcome is failure. Both are growth. Because mastering yourself doesn't mean eliminating emotion. It means learning to recognize when emotion is speaking and allowing wisdom to decide whether it should be followed. The strongest people are not those who never become angry. They are those who recognize anger before it controls their words. The wisest people are not those who never feel fear. They are those who acknowledge fear without allowing it to dictate their future. Every meaningful change begins with awareness. The moment you recognize that your mind and your emotions are constantly working together, you stop becoming a prisoner of every impulse, and you begin becoming the author of your own decisions. Chapter 2: The Mirror That Distorts Reality. Have you ever met someone who seemed completely convinced they were always right? No matter what evidence appeared before them, no matter how many people disagreed, they never questioned themselves. At first, it's easy to think they're arrogant. Sometimes that's true, but often something much deeper is happening. Every human being carries an invisible mirror, not the kind hanging on a bedroom wall, a psychological mirror, one that reflects the image we desperately want to believe about ourselves. We want to see ourselves as intelligent, kind, competent, fair, capable. Whenever something threatens that image, our mind reacts almost instantly, not with curiosity, but with protection. Imagine receiving criticism at work. Your manager points out a mistake. Objectively, it's a small correction, but emotionally, it feels much larger. Instead of hearing, This report needs improvement. Your brain quietly translates it into, you're not good enough. That translation changes everything. Now the conversation is no longer about the report. It's about your identity. And when identity feels threatened, logic quietly leaves the room. This explains why two people can receive the exact same feedback and respond in completely different ways. One becomes defensive, the other becomes curious. The difference isn't intelligence, it's emotional security. People who feel secure don't need to defend every mistake. They understand that making an error doesn't make them a failure. It simply makes them human. Those who lack that security often build invisible walls around their ego. Every compliment becomes proof of superiority. Every criticism becomes an attack. Every disagreement becomes a battle. Over time, those walls become a prison. Because the more someone protects their image, the less they allow themselves to grow. Ironically, the strongest confidence rarely belongs to the loudest person in the room. It belongs to the individual who can calmly admit, I was wrong. Those 4 words require enormous strength. Why? Because they separate identity from behavior. They recognize that being wrong about one decision does not mean being a worthless person. The same principle applies when we judge other people. We often assume we know who someone is after only a few interactions. A quiet person becomes cold. A confident person becomes arrogant. Someone who disagrees with us becomes difficult. Yet we're rarely judging the person. We're judging the story we've created about them. Human beings naturally fill missing information with assumptions. Our brains prefer certainty over uncertainty, even if that certainty is completely inaccurate. That's why first impressions can be both powerful and dangerously misleading. A single awkward conversation can shape years of perception. A single mistake can overshadow dozens of successes. Fortunately, awareness gives us another choice. Instead of asking, who is this person? Try asking, what don't I know about them yet? That one question changes your entire perspective. Curiosity replaces judgment. Empathy replaces assumption. Connection replaces distance. There's another hidden truth most people overlook. The image we protect most fiercely isn't always our public image. Sometimes it's the private story we tell ourselves. I'm not smart enough. People always leave me. I'll never succeed. These beliefs quietly shape our behavior long before reality has a chance to. When we believe we're destined to fail, we unconsciously notice only evidence that confirms it. When we believe people can't be trusted, every disappointment feels like proof. This is the invisible power of perception. We rarely experience reality exactly as it is. We experience reality through the stories we already believe. Changing your life often begins by questioning those stories. Not every thought deserves your trust. Not every fear deserves your obedience. Chapter 3. The masks we wear every day. Take a moment and think about the different versions of yourself. The version your family knows. The version your closest friends see. The version that appears during a job interview. The version that walks into an important meeting. The version that quietly sits alone at night. Which one is the real you? The answer might surprise you. They're all real. Every day, without realizing it, we adjust ourselves depending on the people around us. We lower our voice in a library. We become more energetic at a celebration. We choose our words more carefully when speaking to someone we respect. This isn't hypocrisy. It's adaptation. Human beings are naturally social creatures. Long before modern society existed, survival depended on belonging to a group. Being accepted meant protection. Being rejected could mean death. Even though thousands of years have passed, that ancient instinct still lives inside us. It's why we instinctively observe a room before speaking, why we notice people's expressions while telling a story, why we adjust our behavior without consciously deciding to. Our brains are constantly asking one silent question: how should I act here? That question shapes far more of our personality than we realize. But adaptation has a hidden danger. Sometimes the role becomes so convincing we forget who we are underneath it. Some people spend years trying to impress everyone around them, always saying the right thing, always avoiding disagreement, always becoming whoever others expect them to be. At first, this seems like a smart strategy. People like them. Conflicts become rare. Life appears easier. But over time, something begins to disappear. Authenticity. When every decision is based on gaining approval, your real opinions slowly become quieter. Eventually, even you begin wondering what you genuinely believe. This is why many successful people still feel strangely empty. They've mastered performing, but they've forgotten how to simply exist. The most respected individuals aren't those who never adapt. They're the ones who know exactly where adaptation ends and authenticity begins. They understand the difference between changing their approach and changing their identity. Imagine water being poured into different containers. A glass, a bottle, a bowl. The shape changes every time, but the water remains the same. People with strong character live in exactly this way. Their communication changes depending on the situation. Their kindness doesn't. Their confidence changes depending on the audience. Their values don't. Their words become more formal or more relaxed. Their integrity remains untouched. That's true flexibility. Not pretending to be someone else, but expressing the same person in different ways. There's another reason we wear social masks. Fear. Fear of rejection, fear of embarrassment, fear of not being enough. So we create versions of ourselves that seem safer. The funny one, the perfect employee, the tough leader, the person who never needs help. These identities protect us until they begin trapping us because every mask requires energy to maintain. The more masks you wear, the more exhausted you become. Eventually, people stop connecting with the real person. They connect with the performance. And performances can never satisfy the deep human need to be understood. Real connection begins the moment someone feels they are meeting the genuine you. Not a flawless version, not a carefully designed image, just a human being. Confident enough to be imperfect, strong enough to admit uncertainty, comfortable enough to laugh at their own mistakes. Ironically, those imperfections often make people trust us even more. Perfection creates distance. Authenticity creates connection. The goal isn't to remove every social mask. Some are necessary. Professionalism matters. Courtesy matters. Respect matters. But beneath every role you play, never lose sight of the person wearing it. Because in a world where everyone is trying to become someone impressive, the rarest person is someone who remains genuinely themselves. Chapter 4. The Habits That Quietly Control Your Life. Have you ever promised yourself, tomorrow will be different? Tomorrow, you'll wake up earlier. Tomorrow, you'll stop procrastinating. Tomorrow, you'll finally become disciplined. But tomorrow comes, and somehow everything happens exactly the same way again. Why? Because most of our lives are not controlled by conscious decisions. They're controlled by unconscious patterns. Every repeated behavior begins with a reason, not always a logical one. Sometimes it's comfort, sometimes it's fear, sometimes it's simply familiarity. The mind loves what feels familiar, even when it hurts us. Think about someone who constantly checks their phone. At first, it seems harmless, just one quick look, then another, then another. Soon, hours disappear without them noticing. The phone isn't the real habit, it's the emotional reward behind it. A brief escape from boredom, a distraction from stress, a tiny burst of novelty. Every habit survives because it satisfies an emotional need. Until we understand that need, changing the habit becomes almost impossible. Many people try to change their behavior using willpower alone. They force themselves to stop. They make strict rules. They push harder. Sometimes it works. Usually, it doesn't last because the behavior was never the real problem. It was the emotion hiding underneath it. Imagine someone who works endlessly every single day. Everyone admires their dedication. They call them ambitious, disciplined, successful. But what if that person isn't driven by passion? What if they're terrified of feeling unimportant? Suddenly, the endless work isn't discipline. It's fear wearing the mask of productivity. The same pattern appears everywhere. Some people constantly seek approval. Others can't stop buying things they don't need. Some chase perfect relationships. Others sabotage every opportunity that comes their way. On the surface, these behaviors look completely different. Underneath, they're often trying to solve the same emotional discomfort. The human mind is incredibly creative. When it cannot heal an emotional wound, it learns to distract itself from it. That's why awareness changes everything. Instead of asking, "How do I stop doing this?" try asking, "What feeling am I trying to escape?" That question reaches much deeper. Maybe it's loneliness. Maybe it's uncertainty. Maybe it's the fear of failure. Or maybe it's a belief you've carried since childhood. Once you recognize the emotion, the behavior begins to lose its power. This doesn't happen overnight. Habits built over years rarely disappear in a day, but every moment of awareness weakens their grip. Imagine driving the same road every morning. Eventually, you stop noticing the turns. You simply arrive. Habits work the same way. The brain creates shortcuts to save energy. That's helpful when learning to ride a bicycle. Less helpful when repeating behaviors that quietly limit your life. The good news is this: the brain can always build new paths. Every time you pause before reacting, every time you choose patience instead of impulse, every time you replace an old habit with a healthier one, you're teaching your mind a different way to live. It won't feel natural at first. In fact, it may feel uncomfortable. But discomfort isn't always a sign that something is wrong. Sometimes it's proof that something is changing. Growth rarely feels familiar. That's why so many people return to old patterns, not because they're impossible to escape, but because they're comfortable. Real transformation begins the moment you're willing to feel temporary discomfort in exchange for lasting freedom. Because your future isn't shaped by the promises you make once. It's shaped by the small choices you repeat every single day. Chapter 5: The Quiet Voice of Comparison. Imagine walking into a room filled with successful people. Within seconds, your mind begins making silent comparisons. Someone seems more confident. Someone speaks more fluently. Someone looks more accomplished. Without anyone saying a single word, you suddenly begin questioning your own value. Comparison is one of the oldest habits of the human mind, long before social media existed, long before resumes, job titles, or follower counts. People constantly measured themselves against those around them. Who was stronger? Who had more resources? Who held more influence? Who attracted more respect? In ancient times, these comparisons helped people survive. Today, they often steal our peace. The problem isn't comparison itself. Comparison is natural. The problem begins when comparison quietly transforms into envy. Envy has a strange way of disguising itself. It rarely announces, "I wish I had what they have." Instead, it whispers things like, "They were just lucky. They don't deserve it. If only I had their opportunities." Little by little, admiration becomes resentment, and resentment blinds us. When we become obsessed with another person's success, we stop paying attention to our own growth. It's like spending an entire race looking sideways instead of forward. No matter how fast you run, you'll eventually stumble. Think about two musicians. One spends every day practicing, learning, and improving. The other spends every day watching the first musician, wondering why they became successful. Months later, only one of them has grown. Attention is one of the most valuable resources you possess. Where you place it determines who you become. When you focus on someone else's achievements with curiosity, you learn. When you focus on them with bitterness, you suffer. There's another side to comparison that many people never notice. Sometimes, we're not jealous of what people have. We're jealous of how they make us feel about ourselves. A friend's promotion doesn't hurt because they succeeded. It hurts because it reminds us of goals we've been avoiding. Someone else's confidence doesn't threaten us. It exposes the confidence we wish we had. In this way, envy often acts like a mirror. It points toward the areas of life where we secretly long to grow. Instead of asking, "Why do they have that?" try asking, "What is this feeling trying to teach me?" That single question changes envy into information. Instead of becoming trapped by comparison, You become guided by it. Gratitude plays an important role here. Not because gratitude magically removes ambition, but because it reminds you how far you've already come. The person you are today was once someone you hoped to become. It's easy to forget that. The human mind naturally adapts to progress. Yesterday's dream quickly becomes today's normal, then tomorrow's dissatisfaction. That's why enough never feels like enough, unless we consciously stop to appreciate it. This doesn't mean you stop striving. It means your ambition is no longer fueled by insecurity. It becomes fueled by purpose. Some of the happiest people you'll ever meet are not the ones who have the most. They're the ones who spend the least amount of time measuring their lives against everyone else's. Because they understand something simple. Life is not a competition against the people around you. It's a lifelong conversation between the person you used to be and the person you're becoming. Chapter 6. The Trap of Living for Today. Imagine being offered two choices. You can receive $100 today or $200 a month from now. Most people immediately reach for the money they can hold today. It feels certain, immediate, real. The larger reward feels distant, almost imaginary. This simple choice reveals something fascinating about the human mind. We naturally value what is in front of us more than what lies ahead. It's why saving money is difficult, why healthy habits are easy to postpone, why long-term dreams are often sacrificed for short-term comfort. Our brains evolved in a world where survival depended on responding to what was happening right now. Food available today mattered more than food that might appear next month. Danger in front of you demanded immediate attention. Patience was useful, but survival came first. Thousands of years later, that same instinct still shapes our decisions. Only now, the greatest threats are rarely immediate. They're gradual. Debt doesn't appear overnight. Poor health develops one meal at a time. Broken relationships usually begin with small conversations that never happened. A wasted career often starts with one postponed opportunity after another. The future isn't destroyed by one terrible decision. It's shaped by hundreds of tiny choices that seem insignificant in the moment. Think about planting a tree. On the first day, nothing changes. A week later, still nothing remarkable. Even after several months, it may look almost the same. But beneath the surface, roots are quietly expanding, preparing for growth no one can yet see. Success works in exactly the same way. People often admire the result. They rarely notice the years of invisible preparation. This is why patience feels so difficult. The effort comes first. The reward comes much later. And during that waiting period, your mind constantly whispers, maybe this isn't working. That voice has convinced countless people to quit just before progress became visible. The irony is that short-term thinking often creates the very future we fear. Someone avoids exercising because they're tired today. Years later, they wish they had started sooner. Someone delays learning a new skill because it feels difficult. Later, they wonder why opportunities passed them by. Someone refuses to have an uncomfortable conversation. Months later, the relationship quietly falls apart. The cost of avoiding temporary discomfort is almost always greater than the discomfort itself. Long-term thinkers see the world differently. When they make decisions, they don't only ask what feels good today. They ask, who will this choice help me become? That single question changes everything. Suddenly, reading one chapter matters. Saving a small amount of money matters. Making one healthy meal matters. Listening instead of reacting matters. Because each action is no longer isolated. It's becoming part of the person you're building. The future isn't something that suddenly arrives one day. It's something you're creating right now, whether you realize it or not. Every habit, every conversation, every decision, every moment of discipline, they're all small investments. And like any investment, their greatest value isn't visible immediately. It's revealed over time. The people who achieve extraordinary things aren't always the most talented. Often, they're simply the ones willing to sacrifice today's comfort for tomorrow's freedom. Because they understand a truth that most people overlook. The life you experience 5 years from now is quietly being built by the choices you make today. Chapter 7. Why People Become Defensive. Think back to the last time someone corrected you. Maybe it was your boss, a friend, your partner, or even a stranger online. Before you had time to think, you felt something. Your heart beat a little faster. Your muscles tightened. And almost instinctively, you wanted to explain yourself, to defend your actions, to prove you weren't wrong. This reaction happens so quickly that we often mistake it for logic. But it isn't. It's protection. Every human being carries an invisible image of themselves, an identity built over years. I'm responsible. I'm intelligent. I'm a good parent. I'm a capable person. Whenever someone challenges that image, our brain interprets it as a threat, not a physical threat, an emotional one. And emotional threats trigger surprisingly similar reactions. We interrupt, we justify, we deny, we shift the blame, or we quietly shut down altogether. Very few arguments begin because people disagree about facts. Most arguments begin because people feel misunderstood. Imagine telling a coworker, "I think this report could be improved." You intended to discuss the report, but what they hear is, "You're not competent." Suddenly, the conversation changes. No longer about ideas. Now it's about self-worth. That's why some discussions become impossible. The louder one person pushes, the more the other resists. Not because they're stubborn, but because their identity feels under attack. The fascinating part is this. The more insecure we are about something, the more aggressively we defend it. People who are genuinely confident don't need to prove they're right every minute. They can listen, ask questions, even admit mistakes, because they understand that being wrong doesn't make them weak. It makes them human. This understanding transforms the way we communicate. Instead of trying to win every conversation, we begin trying to understand it. Imagine speaking with someone who's clearly upset. Your first instinct may be to explain why they're mistaken, to defend yourself, to present evidence. But emotions rarely disappear because of better arguments. People calm down when they feel heard. Sometimes the most powerful sentence in a difficult conversation isn't, "Let me explain." It's, "Help me understand how you see this." Those 7 words lower emotional walls. They signal respect instead of opposition. And respect creates safety. When people feel safe, they stop protecting themselves. That's when real communication begins. Chapter 8. The invisible ways we sabotage ourselves. Most people believe failure comes from a lack of talent, or a lack of opportunity, or bad luck. Sometimes that's true, but often, the greatest obstacle isn't outside us. It's the quiet voice inside us, the one that whispers, "You're not ready. Wait a little longer. Someone else could do this better." At first, these thoughts seem reasonable, even responsible, but over time, they become invisible walls. Walls we build ourselves. Imagine someone with an incredible business idea. They spend months planning, researching, perfecting every detail, but they never launch. Not because the idea isn't good, because it never feels perfect. From the outside, it looks like patience. From the inside, it's fear. Fear often disguises itself as preparation. Another person dreams of changing careers. Every year they promise, "Next year I'll do it." Next year becomes 5 years. 5 years become 10. Eventually, they convince themselves it was never meant to happen, but the dream didn't disappear. It was postponed until it quietly faded away. This is how self-sabotage works. It rarely looks dramatic. It looks ordinary. Procrastination, overthinking. Chapter 9. The emotions you never notice. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack every single day. At first, you notice the weight. After a few weeks, it begins to feel normal. Months later, you hardly remember you're carrying it at all. Emotions work the same way. Not every feeling announces itself. Some quietly settle into the background of our lives. They influence our decisions, shape our relationships, and color the way we see the world, without us ever realizing they're there. Have you ever found yourself becoming irritated over something incredibly small? A slow driver, a delayed message, a misplaced object. The event itself wasn't the real problem. It simply touched an emotion that had been building long before that moment. Stress rarely explodes all at once. It accumulates. Disappointment accumulates. Loneliness accumulates. Unspoken resentment accumulates. Eventually, the smallest trigger releases everything at once. People watching from the outside often say, "Why are they overreacting?" But they're only seeing the final drop, not the bucket that has been filling for months. This is why emotional awareness is so important. Many of us spend our lives managing the symptoms without ever exploring the source. We try to control our anger, but ignore our exhaustion. We try to silence our anxiety, but never ask what it's trying to tell us. Every emotion carries information. Fear may be warning you about uncertainty. Sadness may be reminding you of something you've lost. Frustration may be pointing toward needs you've been ignoring. The emotion itself isn't the enemy. Ignoring it often is. Think about pressure building inside a sealed container. The more pressure trapped inside, the greater the explosion when it finally escapes. Human emotions follow a similar pattern. Feelings that are acknowledged tend to soften. Feelings that are buried often become stronger. Many people believe strength means hiding emotion, never crying, never admitting fear, never showing vulnerability. But true emotional strength looks very different. It begins with honesty, being able to quietly admit, "I'm overwhelmed, I'm disappointed, I'm afraid." Those simple acknowledgments remove the need for emotions to fight for your attention, because emotions ignored become louder. Another common mistake is believing every emotion deserves immediate action. Feeling angry doesn't mean you should speak. Feeling afraid doesn't mean you should run. Feeling insecure doesn't mean you're incapable. Emotions deserve attention. They don't automatically deserve obedience. This distinction changes everything. You can listen to an emotion without allowing it to control your behavior. Imagine standing beside a river. Your thoughts and feelings flow past like water. Some are calm, some are turbulent. You don't need to jump into every current. Sometimes the wisest decision is simply to watch, to notice, to understand, then let it continue downstream. That space between feeling and action is where emotional freedom begins. Because people who master their emotions don't experience fewer feelings than everyone else. They simply refuse to let every feeling become a decision. Over time, this quiet practice transforms the way you experience life. Conflicts become shorter. Anxiety becomes more manageable. Relationships become deeper. Not because life becomes easier, but because you stop fighting every emotion that passes through you. Instead, you learn to understand it. And in understanding your emotions, you begin understanding yourself. Chapter 10, The Silent Enemy Called Envy. There is an emotion that almost no one likes to admit, not because it's rare, but because it's deeply uncomfortable. It's envy. Most people imagine envy as openly wanting someone else's success, but real envy is much quieter than that. It hides behind criticism, behind sarcasm, behind indifference, sometimes even behind false praise. Imagine hearing that an old friend has just achieved something incredible. Maybe they started a successful business, bought their dream home, or reached a goal they've worked toward for years. For a brief moment, you're genuinely happy for them. Then another feeling appears. A question you never intended to ask. Why not me? That question doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you human. Our minds naturally compare our lives to the people around us, especially those who once stood where we stand today. The problem begins when comparison turns into resentment, because resentment quietly steals our attention. Instead of learning from successful people, we begin looking for reasons to dismiss them. They had connections. They were lucky. Anyone could have done it. These stories protect our pride, but they also prevent our growth. It's difficult to learn from someone you've convinced yourself doesn't deserve their success. Envy has another hidden cost. It changes the way we see ourselves. When we constantly focus on what others have, we stop noticing everything we've already built. Our progress begins to feel invisible. Our achievements seem insignificant. No matter how much we accomplish, someone else always appears to have more. More money, more influence, more confidence, more happiness. It's an endless race with no finish line, and no one truly wins. The happiest people aren't those who never compare themselves. They're the ones who know when to stop. They understand that another person's success isn't an evidence of their own failure. Life isn't divided into limited opportunities. Someone else's victory doesn't reduce your chances of finding your own. In fact, the people you admire often prove what's possible. Instead of asking, why do they have what I don't? Ask, what can I learn from the path they took? That single shift transforms envy into inspiration. The energy that once created bitterness now creates motivation. There's another form of envy that's even more dangerous. The envy directed toward people who seem happier. Not wealth, not status, peace, confidence, meaning. We often assume they were simply born that way. What we rarely see are the years they spent building that life, the difficult conversations they didn't avoid, the habits they practiced every day, the fears they faced when no one was watching. We compare our behind-the-scenes struggles to someone else's finished story. It's never a fair comparison. Every life contains invisible battles. Everyone carries burdens we cannot see. Remembering this makes compassion easier. It reminds us that appearances rarely tell the whole truth. Whenever envy appears, treat it like a teacher instead of an enemy. Ask yourself, what desire is this emotion revealing? Maybe you long for more freedom. Maybe you want deeper relationships. Maybe you're ready to challenge yourself in ways you've been avoiding. Envy often points toward dreams we've been afraid to pursue. If you listen carefully, it can become a compass instead of a prison. Because the goal was never to have someone else's life. The goal has always been to build a life that no longer makes you wish you were someone else. Chapter 11, The Illusion of Being Bigger Than We Are. Every person wants to feel important, to know that their life matters, that their work has value, that their voice deserves to be heard. There is nothing wrong with that desire. In fact, it motivates us to grow. But sometimes, the desire to become important quietly transforms into the need to appear important, and those two paths lead to very different destinations. Think about someone who constantly needs to be the smartest person in every conversation. No matter the topic, they always have the final answer. If someone shares an achievement, they immediately tell a bigger story. If someone offers advice, they explain why they already knew it. At first glance, this looks like confidence. But genuine confidence rarely needs to announce itself. The loudest certainty often hides the deepest insecurity. Real confidence is surprisingly quiet. It asks questions. It listens carefully. It doesn't panic when someone else shines. Because it understands that another person's success doesn't diminish its own. The human ego has a remarkable ability to distort reality. When we receive praise repeatedly, we begin believing we're incapable of making mistakes. We stop listening. We stop learning. We stop questioning ourselves. And the moment we stop questioning ourselves, growth quietly comes to an end. History is filled with brilliant people whose greatest achievements eventually became the source of their downfall. Not because they lacked intelligence, but because success convinced them they no longer needed humility. They believed they were untouchable, above criticism, above failure, above everyone else. Reality eventually reminded them otherwise. Life has a way of humbling anyone who believes they have nothing left to learn. This doesn't happen only to famous leaders or powerful executives. It happens in everyday life. A talented employee ignores feedback because they believe they're already the best. A business owner stops listening to customers because early success made them overconfident. A student believes they no longer need to study because they performed well once. The pattern is always the same. Confidence slowly becomes certainty. Certainty becomes arrogance. And arrogance blinds us to our own weaknesses. One of the greatest strengths a person can develop is intellectual humility. The ability to say, I don't know. Those three words may sound simple, yet they open doors that certainty keeps closed. When you admit you don't know, you become capable of learning. When you admit you were wrong, you become capable of improving. When you admit someone else knows more, you become capable of growing. Ironically, humility doesn't make people respect you less. It often earns even greater respect. Because people naturally trust those who are honest enough to acknowledge their limitations. Humility isn't thinking less of yourself, it's thinking about yourself less often. It allows your attention to shift outward, toward learning, toward understanding, toward serving others. And something remarkable happens. The less energy you spend trying to prove your worth, the more your actions begin proving it naturally. People remember those who make them feel valued, not those who constantly remind everyone of their own achievements. In the end, the strongest person in the room is rarely the one speaking the most. It's often the one still curious enough to keep listening. Chapter 12. Breaking Free from Invisible Expectations. Before you were old enough to make your own decisions, the world had already begun telling you who you should become. Be strong, be successful, don't cry, don't fail, don't disappoint people. Little by little, without realizing it, we begin collecting expectations. Some come from our parents, some from our teachers, some from our friends. Others come from society itself. At first, these expectations seem harmless. They give us direction. They help us fit in. But over time, many people stop asking what they truly want. Instead, they spend their lives chasing what they believe they're supposed to want. Think about how often people make major life decisions because of expectation rather than desire. Choosing a career that impresses others, buying things they can't afford to appear successful, staying in relationships that no longer bring peace, pretending to enjoy a lifestyle that leaves them exhausted. From the outside, everything looks perfect. On the inside, something feels strangely empty, because achievement without authenticity never feels complete. The difficult truth is that many of us fear disappointment more than unhappiness. We'd rather disappoint ourselves quietly than risk disappointing everyone else. Yet every time we ignore our genuine values, we move a little farther away from ourselves. The strange part is that expectations rarely disappear. The moment you satisfy one, another appears. Earn more money, buy a bigger house, gain more recognition, reach another milestone. The finish line keeps moving. And if your happiness depends on reaching it, you'll spend your entire life chasing something that never stands still. Freedom begins with a different question. Not, what do people expect from me? But what kind of person do I truly want to become? The answer may not impress everyone, and that's perfectly fine. A meaningful life was never meant to satisfy every opinion. It was meant to reflect your deepest values. This doesn't mean rejecting advice or refusing to learn from others. Wisdom often comes from listening, but there's a difference between listening to guidance and surrendering your identity. The people who leave the greatest impact on the world rarely follow every expectation placed upon them. They have the courage to think independently, to question old assumptions, to choose purpose over approval. That courage doesn't appear overnight. It grows every time you make one honest decision instead of one popular decision. Every time you choose integrity over image. Every time you remain true to yourself when pretending would be easier. Eventually, those small moments become your character. And character is something no title, no amount of money, and no public recognition can ever replace. Because at the end of the day, the person you must live with every single day isn't the one the world expects you to be. It's the person you become through the choices you make when no one else is watching. Chapter 13. Living without direction. Imagine setting sail across the ocean without a destination. The wind changes. The waves push you in different directions. Days pass. Weeks pass. You're moving constantly, but you're never truly arriving anywhere. This is how many people live their lives. Busy every day, exhausted every night, yet strangely unable to explain what they're actually moving toward. Being busy is not the same as making progress. Activity can create the illusion of purpose. You answer emails, attend meetings, complete endless tasks, cross one item off your list after another. Yet at the end of the year, your life feels almost exactly the same. Not because you didn't work hard, but because effort without direction eventually becomes motion without meaning. Purpose is different. Purpose acts like a compass. It doesn't eliminate obstacles. It simply ensures that every step moves you closer to somewhere that matters. Many people wait for purpose to suddenly appear. They hope one morning they'll wake up feeling absolutely certain about what they should do. But purpose rarely arrives like lightning. More often, it reveals itself through consistent action, by trying, by learning, by failing, by paying attention to what gives your life energy instead of draining it. No one discovers their path by standing still. Imagine a sculptor looking at a block of marble. At first, they don't see the finished masterpiece. They only see possibility. With every careful strike of the chisel, the shape slowly emerges. Purpose develops in the same way. Every experience teaches you something. Every challenge removes another layer. Every mistake reveals another piece of who you are becoming. This is why uncertainty isn't your enemy. It's part of the process. People without direction often become overly influenced by everyone around them. One friend changes careers. They suddenly want to do the same. Someone becomes successful on social media. Now that seems like the perfect path. A new trend appears. Their goals immediately change again. Without an internal compass, the loudest voice in the room becomes your guide. But other people's dreams were never designed to become your destination. Their path belongs to them. Yours belongs to you. Purpose also requires patience. The world celebrates dramatic transformations, overnight success, instant wealth, rapid change. Reality is usually much quieter. A meaningful life is built through ordinary days repeated with extraordinary consistency. One conversation, one habit, one decision, one chapter, one lesson, repeated long enough. Small actions become remarkable results. Ask yourself a different question. Not, where do I want to be next month? Instead ask, who do I want to become over the next 10 years? That question shifts your attention away from quick rewards toward lasting growth. Because careers change, goals evolve, life takes unexpected turns, but character continues guiding every decision you make. When your purpose is rooted in becoming a wiser, kinder, more disciplined, and more courageous person, no experience is wasted. Even setbacks become teachers. Even failure becomes preparation. The people who build extraordinary lives rarely know every step in advance. They simply commit to moving forward with intention, one day at a time, one decision at a time. Trusting that clarity doesn't always come before the journey. Sometimes, clarity is the reward for continuing to walk. Chapter 14. The invisible pull of the crowd. Imagine walking into a room where everyone suddenly looks toward the same corner. Without thinking, you turn your head too, not because you know something is there, but because everyone else seems to believe there is. This simple reaction reveals something powerful about human nature. We are deeply influenced by the people around us, far more than we like to admit. From childhood, we learn by watching others. We copy the way people speak, the way they dress, the way they solve problems, even the way they react to success and failure. Observation is one of humanity's greatest strengths, but it also creates one of our greatest vulnerabilities. Sometimes, we stop thinking for ourselves. Think about how often people follow trends, not because they truly believe in them, but because everyone else does. A new investment becomes popular, millions rush in, a rumor spreads online. Thousands believe it before checking the facts. A crowd applauds an idea. Suddenly, questioning it feels uncomfortable. The desire to belong is stronger than most people realize. Being accepted feels safe. Being different feels risky. Our ancestors depended on their tribe for survival. Standing alone could be dangerous. Although the world has changed, that ancient instinct remains. Today, rejection rarely threatens our survival, but it still threatens our comfort. That's why so many people stay silent when they disagree. They laugh at jokes they don't find funny. They agree with opinions they secretly question. They avoid difficult conversations because standing apart feels uncomfortable. Little by little, They begin living according to the expectations of the crowd instead of the convictions of their own conscience. The danger isn't that other people influence you. Influence is unavoidable. The danger comes when you never stop to ask, do I actually believe this? Independent thinking doesn't mean rejecting every popular idea. It means examining it before accepting it. It means having the courage to pause while everyone else rushes forward. History repeatedly reminds us that major breakthroughs rarely begin with agreement. New discoveries were once considered impossible. New inventions were once ridiculed. Great leaders were often criticized long before they were admired. Progress almost always begins with someone willing to think differently. Of course, thinking independently doesn't mean thinking arrogantly. It doesn't mean assuming everyone else is wrong. Wisdom requires humility. Sometimes the crowd is right, sometimes it isn't. The key is learning to distinguish between evidence and popularity. Ask yourself, would I still believe this if no one else believed it? Or perhaps an even more difficult question, would I still reject this if everyone else accepted it? Those questions protect your ability to think clearly. There's another truth many people overlook. The people you spend the most time with quietly shape your future, not because they force you to become like them, but because their habits slowly become familiar. Their standards become your standards. Their attitudes become easier to adopt. Their expectations quietly become your own. If you're surrounded by people who constantly complain, complaining begins to feel normal. If you're surrounded by people who pursue growth, growth begins to feel possible. Environment is often stronger than motivation. That's why choosing who influences you may be one of the most important decisions you'll ever make. You cannot always control the world around you, but you can choose which voices deserve the greatest influence over your mind, because the crowd will always have an opinion. The question is, will you spend your life following it or learning when to respectfully walk your own path? Chapter 15. The greatest battle happens within. When people imagine conflict, they often picture arguments, competition, opponents standing face to face. But the longest battle you'll ever fight will probably be invisible because it happens inside your own mind. Every day, two voices quietly compete for your attention. One encourages growth, the other whispers fear. One says, try again. The other replies, why bother? One reminds you that mistakes are temporary. The other insists they define who you are. Neither voice disappears completely. The question is, which one do you practice listening to? Most people believe confidence comes before action. They think successful people wake up every morning filled with certainty, but reality is often the opposite. Confidence is rarely the starting point. It's the result of repeatedly acting despite uncertainty. Every meaningful achievement begins with discomfort. The writer faces the blank page. The entrepreneur faces the possibility of failure. The student faces the fear of not being good enough. The athlete faces another exhausting practice. The challenge is different for each person, but the internal conversation is remarkably similar. Maybe I'm not ready. What if I fail? What if people judge me? These thoughts are normal. They don't make you weak. They simply remind you that your brain is designed to protect you from uncertainty. The problem is that the mind often confuses discomfort with danger. Trying something new feels risky. Speaking in front of others feels threatening. Making a difficult decision creates anxiety. Your mind interprets these experiences as reasons to stay exactly where you are. Yet growth almost always begins where comfort ends. Think back to a skill you once found impossible. Perhaps riding a bicycle, learning a language, driving a car. At first, every movement demanded your full attention. You doubted yourself constantly. You made mistakes. You felt embarrassed. But eventually, something changed. Not because the challenge disappeared, but because repetition transformed uncertainty into familiarity. The same principle applies to almost every area of life. What feels impossible today may simply be unfamiliar. And the greatest obstacle isn't always lack of ability. It's often the story you continue telling yourself. I'm not the kind of person who can do this. People like me never succeed. I've always been this way. These sentences seem harmless, but repeated often enough, they become invisible boundaries. Your identity begins shaping your behavior, and your behavior quietly reinforces your identity. Breaking that cycle begins with a single realization. You are not every thought you think. Thoughts appear automatically. Some are useful, some are completely untrue. Wisdom comes from learning the difference. Instead of immediately believing every fearful thought, become curious about it. Ask, is this a fact or simply a prediction? Is this voice protecting me or limiting me? That small pause creates freedom. It gives you space to choose your response instead of reacting automatically. Over time, those tiny choices reshape your life, not dramatically, not overnight, but consistently. The strongest people aren't those who never experience fear. They're the ones who refuse to let fear become the author of their decisions. Because every meaningful life contains uncertainty. Every worthwhile dream includes moments of doubt. Every person you admire has wrestled with an inner voice that told them to give up. The difference is that they kept moving anyway. And perhaps that's the most important lesson of all. The greatest victory isn't defeating someone else. It's becoming the kind of person who no longer allows fear to decide who they can become. Chapter 16, Why We Keep Repeating the Same Mistakes. Have you ever promised yourself, this time will be different? You told yourself you would stay calm, you wouldn't procrastinate, you wouldn't return to the same unhealthy habits, you wouldn't make the same decision again. And yet, weeks or months later, you found yourself standing in the exact same place. Many people see this as proof that they lack discipline, but that's rarely the real problem. The truth is far more subtle. Human beings don't simply repeat behaviors. We repeat patterns. A behavior is what you do. A pattern is why you keep doing it. Until you understand the pattern, the behavior almost always returns. Imagine someone who repeatedly spends money they don't have. They tell themselves the next purchase will finally make them happier. For a brief moment, it does. The excitement feels real. But once the novelty fades, the emptiness quietly returns. So they buy something else. The problem was never the purchase itself. It was the emotional need hiding underneath it. Another person constantly seeks approval. They work harder than everyone else. They say yes to every request. They avoid disappointing anyone. People praise their dedication, but privately, they feel exhausted. Not because they're weak, but because they're trying to earn a sense of worth that no amount of praise can permanently provide. Different behavior, the same pattern. Many of our habits aren't created by logic. They're created by emotion. Stress creates one routine. Loneliness creates another. Boredom creates another. Fear creates yet another. When the emotion appears, the habit quietly follows. This is why willpower often fails. You can resist a habit for a while, but if the emotional trigger remains unchanged, eventually the old routine begins to feel familiar again. Real change starts with awareness. Instead of asking, how do I stop this habit? Try asking, what feeling usually comes before it? That question changes everything. Perhaps you notice that you procrastinate most when you're afraid of failing. Perhaps you become impatient when you're feeling ignored. Perhaps you criticize others most when you're secretly disappointed in yourself. The behavior is only the surface. The emotion is the root. And roots cannot be removed by trimming the leaves. There's another reason we repeat old mistakes. Our brains love familiarity. Even painful familiarity can feel safer than uncertain change. A difficult relationship may continue because it's predictable. An unhealthy routine may survive because it's comfortable. A limiting belief may remain because it has been with us for years. The unknown feels frightening, even when it offers something better. This is why lasting growth requires courage, not dramatic courage, quiet courage. The courage to interrupt an old pattern before it completes itself, to pause instead of reacting, to breathe instead of exploding in anger, to walk away instead of repeating the same argument, to rest instead of escaping through distraction. At first, these small choices feel unnatural. Your mind will urge you to return to what is familiar. It will tell you this is who you've always been, but your past habits are not your permanent identity. They are simply well-practiced responses, and anything practiced can be practiced differently. Every new response strengthens a different pathway. Every moment of awareness weakens an automatic reaction. Slowly, without noticing, the person you are becoming begins responding differently than the person you used to be. The mistake may still appear. The temptation may still return. But now, there is space between the feeling and the action. And within that space, you discover something you may have forgotten you possessed: choice. Because freedom is rarely found in controlling the world around you. More often, it is found in learning that you no longer have to repeat every pattern your mind has inherited. The moment you recognize the pattern, you are no longer trapped inside it. And that recognition is where real transformation quietly begins. Chapter 17: The Freedom That Comes from Letting Go. There is a strange belief that many of us carry throughout life. If we hold on tightly enough to our plans, to our opinions, to our past, to the people we love, then somehow nothing painful will ever leave us. But life has never worked that way. The tighter we try to hold on, the more exhausted we become. Think about how often suffering continues long after the event itself has ended. Someone criticizes you. The conversation lasts 5 minutes. Yet your mind replays it for 5 days. A relationship ends. Months later, you are still arguing with that person in your imagination. An opportunity disappears. Years later, you continue wondering what your life might have become. The event has passed, but your attachment remains. Much of our emotional pain comes not from what happened, but from our refusal to let the moment end. The mind has an incredible talent for reopening closed doors. It revisits old conversations. It rewrites old memories. It invents better endings that never existed. And while it is busy living in yesterday, today quietly slips away. Letting go does not mean pretending something never mattered. It does not mean forgetting people, ignoring grief, or convincing yourself that pain isn't real. Quite the opposite. Letting go begins by fully acknowledging reality. It means saying, "This happened. I cannot change it, but I can choose what happens next." Acceptance is often misunderstood. Many people confuse acceptance with surrender. They believe that accepting reality means approving of it. It doesn't. Acceptance simply means refusing to waste your energy fighting facts that cannot be changed. Imagine standing in the middle of a storm. You can spend hours shouting at the wind, demanding that the rain stop, arguing with the clouds. Nothing changes. Or you can seek shelter, adjust your path, wait patiently until the storm passes. The weather was never under your control. Only your response was. Life works the same way. You cannot control every disappointment, every rejection, every unexpected ending, but you always have influence over how long those moments continue living inside you. Sometimes, the hardest thing to release isn't another person. It's the version of yourself you thought you were going to become. The career you imagined, the future you planned, the dream that never arrived. Grieving those possibilities is natural, but staying attached to them forever prevents new possibilities from appearing. Life has a remarkable habit of creating opportunities that were impossible to imagine while we were clinging to old expectations. Many people discover their true calling only after their original plan falls apart. Many lasting friendships begin after painful endings. Many moments of unexpected peace arrive only after we stop trying to control every outcome. There is another kind of attachment that quietly shapes our lives. The attachment to being right. How many arguments continue simply because neither person is willing to let go of their pride? How many relationships slowly fade because forgiveness feels more difficult than resentment? Sometimes winning an argument costs far more than losing one. Peace often asks us to release the need to prove ourselves, not because truth doesn't matter, but because connection sometimes matters more. As the years pass, you begin to notice something surprising. The happiest people are rarely those who control everything. They are often the ones who adapt most gracefully when life changes. They understand that nothing remains exactly the same. Not success, not failure, not youth, not hardship. Everything moves, everything changes, everything eventually passes. And once you truly understand that, you stop clinging so tightly. You begin appreciating moments instead of trying to possess them. You begin loving people without demanding certainty. You begin pursuing goals without believing your worth depends upon achieving them. That is a different kind of freedom, a quieter freedom, one that cannot be taken away by circumstances, because it no longer depends on life unfolding exactly as you planned. It depends on your willingness to meet life as it is, rather than endlessly wishing it were something else. Chapter 18. The person you become every day. When people think about changing their lives, they usually imagine dramatic moments, a new job, a major breakthrough, a life-changing opportunity, a single decision that transforms everything. But real transformation rarely arrives all at once. More often, it happens so quietly that you don't notice it while it's happening. Imagine watching a tree grow. If you look at it every day, it seems exactly the same. Yet months later, its branches have stretched farther, its roots have grown deeper, its trunk has become stronger. Growth was always taking place. It was simply too gradual to see. Human character develops in much the same way. You are not shaped by your biggest decisions alone. You are shaped by the countless ordinary decisions no one else ever notices. The choice to tell the truth when lying would be easier. The choice to remain patient when frustration feels justified. The choice to keep your promise even when no one would know if you broke it. These moments rarely attract applause, but they quietly build the foundation of who you become. Character is built in private, long before it is recognized in public. Many people spend years trying to change their circumstances. Very few spend the same energy changing themselves. Yet circumstances often come and go. Skills can become outdated. Opportunities appear and disappear. But character follows you everywhere. It influences every friendship, every relationship, every career, every decision, every challenge you will ever face. There is a simple question worth asking yourself at the end of each day. Not, did I accomplish everything I planned? But, did I become a slightly better version of the person I was yesterday? Some days, the answer will be obvious. Other days, the progress will seem invisible. You may still feel impatient. You may still make mistakes. You may still doubt yourself. That doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're human. Perfection has never been the goal. Progress has. One honest conversation, one act of kindness, one moment of courage, one habit practiced again. These small actions rarely feel significant on their own, but over years, they create a life that looks completely different. The remarkable thing about identity is that it follows evidence. Every time you act with discipline, you provide evidence that you are becoming a disciplined person. Every time you respond with compassion, you strengthen the belief that compassion is part of who you are. Every time you choose wisdom over impulse, you reshape the story you tell yourself. Little by little, your identity changes. And once your identity changes, many of your old habits begin losing their power. Because people naturally act in ways that match the person they believe themselves to be. This is why lasting transformation cannot rely on motivation alone. Motivation comes and goes. Feelings rise and fall. Life becomes busy. Unexpected problems appear. But character remains. Character continues making wise decisions long after excitement has disappeared. As you look back over your own life, you may notice something surprising. The moments that shaped you most were not always the happiest ones. Often, they were the moments that demanded patience, humility, forgiveness, resilience. Those experiences didn't simply change your circumstances, they changed you. And perhaps that has been the quiet message hidden beneath every chapter of this journey. Understanding human psychology isn't about controlling other people. It isn't about manipulating conversations or gaining an advantage over those around you. Its deepest purpose is far simpler: to understand yourself more honestly, to recognize the invisible forces that shape your thoughts, to respond with greater awareness instead of automatic reaction, and to become one ordinary day at a time. The kind of person whose inner peace no longer depends on the changing world around them. Because in the end, the greatest achievement is not becoming someone entirely new. It is becoming the person you were always capable of being. Conclusion: the quiet journey that never ends. As you reach the end of this audiobook, you may be tempted to ask a simple question. So what happens now? The answer is both simple and lifelong. Nothing changes unless something changes within you. Knowledge alone has never transformed anyone. Every library in the world is filled with books containing extraordinary wisdom. Yet wisdom sitting on a shelf changes nothing. Even wisdom remembered in your mind changes very little. Only wisdom practiced has the power to reshape a life. Perhaps there was one chapter that made you pause, one sentence that stayed with you, one idea that quietly challenged the way you've always seen yourself. Don't rush past it. Sometimes, a single honest realization is more valuable than 100 forgotten lessons. The purpose of understanding psychology was never to become perfect. Perfection is an illusion. No one reaches a point where fear disappears forever, where doubt never returns, where mistakes are impossible. Being human means you will continue to struggle. You will occasionally react before thinking. You will sometimes compare yourself to others. You will experience disappointment. You will make decisions you later wish you could change. That is not failure. That is life. The difference now is awareness. Awareness gives you something priceless. A pause, a moment between the feeling and the response. Within that brief moment, you discover freedom. The freedom to choose patience instead of anger, understanding instead of judgment, curiosity instead of certainty, courage instead of avoidance. Those choices may seem small, but they shape every relationship you build, every opportunity you create, every challenge you overcome, and ultimately, the person you become. Remember that the mind is not your enemy. It is a remarkable tool. It protects you, learns for you, adapts for you. But like any powerful tool, it requires guidance. Left unattended, it drifts toward fear, toward habit, toward comfort, toward familiar patterns. Directed with awareness, it becomes capable of extraordinary growth. So continue asking questions. Continue observing yourself. Continue listening before reacting. Continue replacing certainty with curiosity. Continue choosing progress over perfection. Because every day offers another opportunity to become slightly wiser than the day before. You do not need to transform your entire life overnight. You only need to make one better decision than yesterday, then another, and another. Over time, those ordinary decisions become an extraordinary life. Years from now, you may not remember every story you've heard in this audiobook. You may not recall every psychological principle or every example. But if you remember even one thing, let it be this: your life is not shaped only by what happens to you. It is shaped by the meaning you choose to give those experiences. That choice has always belonged to you, and it always will. Thank you for spending this time reflecting, learning, and growing with me. May you move forward with greater awareness, greater compassion, greater courage, and a deeper understanding of both yourself and the people whose lives you touch every day. Because the journey toward understanding the human mind is in many ways the journey toward understanding what it truly means to live.